We found this guy had literally shit all over the toilet seat and the toilet paper holder. Askreddit on Reddit rundown. What made you quit a job on the spot? Nothing dramatic. After working my ass off during the pandemic and promised an additional bonus, I received a low performance review conveniently timed a day before my bonus was to be paid. The low performance feedback cancelled my bonus. Given all the other bullshit I was putting up with, I broke and quit. I had a nice month off and my new job pays significantly more. Never work for people that don't appreciate you, there are always others that will. Somebody replied. I unfortunately work for a company that is currently doing this to me. Busted my ass all through the pandemic. I work on healthcare equipment, working 12-15-hour days regularly. Got the attaboys from the company and managers and was promised a pretty substantial bonus. The end of the fiscal year rolls around and we got our overtime cut instead of the bonus due to unprotected expenditures, yet the corporate guys and managers got 5-figure bonuses for weathering out the storm of the pandemic and succeeding beyond expectations. This was the final confirmation I needed to start looking for a different position. I used to cut grass in a cemetery. I used a push lawn mower and had to lift it up onto the elevated graves, and then back down and onto the next one. Over and over and over. Minimum wage was $4.25 an hour. After an hour of cutting grass in the August heat, I sit down for my break, and this guy named Leroy asks, "Was that worth $4.25 to you?" I quit the next day. Thanks, Leroy. Asked for a raise and was told okay. Next morning, Friday, I was told by the same person who agreed with the raise that I should put a few more years in and then we'll talk again. Locked my toolbox at the end of the day and called a tow truck to pick it up. Shop manager was shocked that next Monday to find an empty spot where my tools were and couldn't understand why I left. My grandfather, who I considered like a father, passed away after a long stay in hospital. We were closer than he was with his own kids, and our bond was quite special. I spoke to my manager about getting the day of his funeral off, since I was organizing part of the arrangements, and having a day or two of bereavement leave, and he agreed. The day of the funeral finally comes and the staff start calling me, leaving me messages asking why I'm not at my shift, and telling me, while I'm in a suit hosting family member at the funeral home, that I have to find someone to replace me or face repercussions. Needless to say, I told them to figure it out, and never looked back. Somebody replied. This happened to my wife. She was at work when her mom called to say my wife's grandma had died. My wife, sobbing, told her manager that she needed to go home. The manager said if you leave now, don't bother coming back. My wife took off her work apron, handed it to the manager, and said I'll come by for my final paycheck. The manager had the nerve to call and pester her at home, so you're not covering your shift tomorrow? No, Frank. Walked into the interview, everything went well, accepted the job offer. Went to the front desk to do the paperwork and noticed that the contract had a different pay amount, and that I would be entering for the first month for $100 per week. I asked first about the amount difference, was told oh, this is the standard contract, it just hasn't been updated for your specific offer. I told them they'd need to edit and initial the changes before I would sign. Oh, that's not how things work here. I thanked them for their time and left without signing anything. They called me back on the day I was supposed to have started asking where I was. I told them because didn't sign the contract, I was never an employee. Boy, that was a fun call. I worked for T-Mobile store, authorized reseller, not an actual dealer. 1 week, I had an amazing week, sold 55 phones, brand new activations on a business account with 55 high-end phones at that time. When I got my next check, they said my paperwork was not in order and thus they couldn't pay me. As a side note, they always told us to make copies of all paperwork in case this happened so you can show it to the manager and get it resolved within a day. I went over my backup paperwork with my boss, he said everything looked to be in order and he would have the office cut me a check. I went to the office, and they told me it was still not in order. I immediately gave them my store key and quit on the spot. I did go through collections and they did settle before I took them to court. The company did go out of business after a few years because they tried that with many other employees and eventually lead to an investigation by the government, according to an old coworker I bumped into years later. Worked as a cashier in a local shop. One night 2 guys came at me with knives trying to get in the till. I just walked away and said have at it, as it wasn't worth the minimum wage to get into it with a couple of guys waving knives at me. After they ran out the store, I picked up my mobile and called the police, then called the store manager. The next day, the district manager meets me as I turn up for my shift the very next day. Her first words were, "It was very unprofessional of me to be on my phone while in work." I laughed at her and told her she could take this as my notice and walked out. I never had a problem with being held up, but the sheer gall of that got me. Worked for a privately owned bakery for exactly 1 week. The owner's son comes in, walks past the counter and into the bathroom. He comes out a few minutes later without acknowledging me or my coworker, gets into his car and drives away. We both looked at each other, then opened the door only to find this guy literally shit all over the toilet seat and the toilet paper holder. I called the owner, told her what happened, and she said to deal with it. So, I asked my coworker if she wanted to clean it up because I wasn't going to. She declined and I told her I was walking out. She did as well. We locked up the store and told the owner we quit but would reconsider staying if her son came back to clean up his own mess. She yelled and berated us for 20 seconds before I said goodbye and hung up. Not me, but a middle-aged tradesman where I work. I work underground and it isn't for everybody, terrible environment and whatnot. This particular individual starting working and after a few weeks decided that it wasn't for him. Bad conditions and hostile supervisor. He approached the boss at the morning meeting and told him that he wasn't going underground and that he was quitting. The boss told him that he had to give him 2 weeks notice, and without missing a beat the guy replied, "For the next 2 weeks you're gonna notice that I'm not here," turned around, packed his shit and left. Was never heard from again. I got mugged on a delivery for Domino's, and came back to the shop crying and panicked, had my phone, wallet, and pizza taken, told my manager what happened. "Anon, are you hurt?" "No, but I lost my phone and wallet. I need to call the police, no time for that. Here's your next delivery." It was like 2 blocks from where I was just mugged. I just went home. The police never really did much to get my phone and wallet back, not like they could. Began working at a Persian restaurant in the kitchen. I overcooked a steak slightly. The owner came back, threw a plate at us, then a hot meat skewer before storming off to his office. I dropped my apron, grabbed my bag and told him I was leaving. His response was, "Okay, at the end of the night you can go." My response was clearly, "You don't understand. I'm leaving right now, here's my parking pass, I'll expect my check in the mail." Somebody replied. I worked at a large banquet hall as a busboy. I cleared needing to leave at 8 p.m. with the 2 owners. 7:50 comes and the manager is barking orders at me to do things that would take another hour. I told him I was done at 8 p.m. and he said, "You're not going anywhere until this party is over." Most receptions went past 10 p.m. I said fine, I quit. His response was exactly like your manager's, "That's fine, you're out of here at the end of the night." I replied, "No man. If I quit, I'm leaving now. See ya." He followed me through the entire reception room, the back hall, the kitchen, and to the parking lot, repeatedly yelling no one talk to him. He quit, he's gone for good. Owners called me back into the business to pick up my check and asked me if I would please come back. I lied and told them I already had another job just to avoid any potential begging. The manager was their uncle and they clearly weren't happy with him, but were afraid to fire him. From what I was told, he continued shouting at workers and eating food meant for guests, all while having another heart attack every couple years. I don't get these people that think anyone would stay until end of shift. Worked for a restaurant/pub. The owner would come in with his buddies for hours at a time, a lot of times forcing the bartender to stay way past close serving them. Obviously was told not to charge anything because it's the owner's party. After hours of drinks on the house, no tip. Not even from the owner. This started to happen frequently. Usually, we'd put up with it if they'd leave or be done before close. Then we started hearing that the kitchen staff hadn't been paid in a month. Bartenders were being paid because we made like $4 an hour. But the kitchen wasn't a tipped kitchen and made a decent wage. Turns out the owner was a total drunk idiot, which should have been obvious, and buried himself in debt. A week later we were told our checks weren't there on the day they were supposed to be. Then 2 days later, still no checks. I told them if my check wasn't there tomorrow, I won't come in for my shift. They said it came. I got there, and they said, well, what I meant was it's actually on the way. I talked to the. And I walked out. I later found out no checks were ever issued there again. They tried to pay some people cash, but it fell apart very soon after. Lol, I had an inside hint from HR that there was about to be mass layoffs and my name was on the list. I scheduled my week-long vacation and returning the day before layoffs were presumed to have happened. My boss reamed me out for daring to take a vacation. She said I would never advance in the company if I chose such a formative time in a project to take a vacation. She told me I would never be an executive producer if I went on a vacation before project launch, even though I wouldn't be able to touch it for the week I was away anyway, and that I would always be known in the television industry as lazy. I chilled, took my vacation, and returned. She was mad and said that she was upset with me for having left and made her take care of my project for me, chewed me out in front of the entire company in the conference room. I chilled and was like, aren't you laying off a bunch of us tomorrow? I'm just waiting for you to fire me so I can collect unemployment. Entire room literally starts panicking and management tries to understand how the hell I knew about layoffs. It was my one true Regina George causing chaos moment in my life. I worked for an attorney. I was 7 months pregnant. I was supposed to be a secretary, but instead I was constantly being sent out as a process server. In July, at the end of my 3 months, August, I was supposed to get a raise and she said that she couldn't give me a raise. The day she said that, I left at lunch and never went back. She was an awful person and the guy I replaced told me that he felt sorry for me on my first day as he was leaving. I should have left that day. Somebody replied, "Damn. I'm sorry. I've worked for several law firms. They are a real mixed bag. They can have lots of money and shit management or just be one attorney that really knows his shit. I was a paralegal and I usually managed our secretary and legal assistants mainly. Everyone else was too busy to teach them and I figured if I taught them right my day would get better. I also told them once I saw their skills exceeding their pay level. If you can get training, you can really bounce upwards in that job." Thanks for listening to Reddit Rundown. Give a thumbs up and subscribe, and help me get to 1,000 subs. Leave a comment below on what kind of topics or stories you would like to hear. You can also check out other videos on my channel. Thanks and have an awesome day.